Welcome, everyone. I'm so honored and so thrilled to interview Eileen McKusick, and we're going to be talking about our electric health. Eileen McKusick, who is the pioneering researcher, writer, inventor, practitioner, educator, and speaker in the fields of therapeutic sound, the human biofield, and electric health. She's the originator of the sound therapy method, Biofield Tuning, the founder of Biofield Tuning Institute, and the author of 2 award-winning books, Tuning the Human Biofield, Healing with Vibrational Sound Therapy, as well as her latest book, Electric Body, Electric Health. Welcome, Eileen.
Thanks, Christine. Great to be here with you today.
Yeah, this is such an honor again to interview you, and I've always learned so much. And we're going to be talking about our electric health. And I think to start this conversation, I was chatting with you a little bit prior to the interview, and I think talking about our electric health in conjunction with this concept of how we're interconnected with the electric universe would be a really exciting intro to start this conversation. So can you just do some broad strokes about what are we talking about when we're talking about the electric universe?
Yeah, one of my favorite topics. Well, most of us have been taught about a universe that's sort of dead and inert, that it's an empty vacuum, that it's suffering from entropy, it's spreading out, it's falling apart, it's dissipating, it's sort of dying in a way, that nothing is connected, right? That everything is sort of particles in a void. And it's all very sort of billiard ball-like and like a watch winding down, which means it's very inert, right? It's sort of a dead thing. And when I discovered the 4th state of matter called plasma, it opened me up to a completely different view of the universe as something that's actually electric and alive and connected. And this whole idea that space is an empty vacuum simply isn't true. Space is filled with plasma, and plasma is essentially the flow of electrically charged particles. So when you start to reframe out of this sort of chemical, mechanical perspective into this living electrical one, you discover that the solar wind isn't just this hot gas that the sun is blowing at us. It's actually a stream of electrically charged particles. And when there's an abundance of them, we get northern lights. Our upper atmosphere, the plasma, which is in dark current mode, switches to glow mode. And we get northern lights, and that is an electrical phenomenon. You know, lightning that's happening is a discharge of our upper atmosphere and the surface of the earth. The earth is continuously having electrical fluctuations. There are things called telluric currents that are actually the same thing that some of us might call dragon lines or ley lines. There are flows of electromagnetic energy in sort of rivers and streams, just like water flows everywhere in different, big rivers and little creeks. Telluric currents also flow. The Aboriginals of Australia called them song lines, and birds navigate on them. So these same sort of electrical flows that are happening on the surface of the earth are happening in our atmosphere, and they're happening in our human bodies as well. That we are electric beings, we have an electrical system, and we are part of the whole electricity that powers the whole cosmos. That essentially, it's just one light. And it's the same light that powers the sun is the same light that powers our bodies.
It's really beautifully put. And as you have this whole system on how to, really evaluate and tune into the biofield. And so can you just paint the picture of how our human biofield really sits in this plasma, field of electricity?
Yeah. So there's an electrical system in our body that we don't learn about. And we learn the parts and pieces. Like if you get an EKG, that's measuring the electrical pulsing, the electrical output of your heart. If you get an EEG, it's measuring the electricity in your brain. But we know our blood carries a charge, and that our bones are crystalline structures that actually make electricity when we compress them. That our fascia is all a semiconductor, our collagen, like really our whole body is networked for electric flow and electric information. And the term biofield was coined in 1994 by a panel of National Institute for Health scientists in an attempt to give a scientific word to what the esoteric or New Age might call an aura or a human energy field. So it was coined to describe the fact that there is some kind of subtle magnetic field around the body. What I've really come to see is that it's a basic law of science that anything that has an electric current running through it has a magnetic field around it. And so you really can't separate the two. We're always trying to like parse things out into pieces, but really the electrical system that sustains us, it's the part of your body that when you're alive, your light is on, we're here talking, we're alive. When you die, your light goes out. And your body's still there, but the electrical system that was animating it is no longer flowing through the body. Right? So it's really, our electrical system is really the essence of who we are. And I would even call it our soul. And so I don't separate, when I talk about the biofield, I'm talking about our electrical system in its entirety.
Yeah, no, I love how you put that. And, just a complete anecdote, I was at an event and I met somebody and she had the ability to be with someone when they were dying, and she literally saw their light leave their body. And so I think there's a through line that's a common experience. Seeing that, when, what keeps us alive is that light within, right? And, it just makes so much sense. And, we could probably have a whole other conversation of how do we lose this knowledge, right? How did we, really come to just look at our bodies as, biochemical in nature? And I think what we're both passionate about is bringing this whole viewpoint into the mainstream narrative to help people feel empowered and how to really feel their best, overcome illness, live a healthy and fulfilled life. And so you talk about electric health, right? This is something that we need to cultivate and to tend to. And so you touched on already, but when you talk about electric health, is there anything else you want to share about what you're talking about?
Yeah, I know sometimes when people hear that term electric health, they think about getting electrocuted or something. I talk about raising your voltage. They're like, oh, that sounds scary. So, just to normalize it, when we talk about our chemical health, nobody thinks about chemical spills or, any of the negative associations to the word chemistry, right? It's just something that we're accustomed to. And I think we'll move that way with electric health as more people become familiar with it. Our electric health is so primary. If we get inflammation in the body, we know that inflammation leads to disease. Well, what an inflammation is in your electrical system is it's a traffic jam. It's a jam up. And you've got too much voltage running through the wires there. Anytime that you have an excess in one place, you end up with deficiencies in others. And so your electrical system gets out of balance. You have certain areas where there's too much electricity and other areas where there's none at all. So the balance of our electrical system and the flow of our electrical system is really important. And that's what we do with Biofield Tuning. We figured out a way to manipulate the magnetic field with sound. So a tuning fork becomes almost like a magnetic stylus that we can find areas in the magnetic field where there is congestion. And it's really easy to find because when you move a tuning fork, let's say I have pain in the shoulder, if I move a tuning fork in towards it, the fork's going to get kind of stuck because the tuning fork is generating a really weak electromagnetic charge, and so it behaves magnetically. And so what we can do is we can find where in the magnetic fields guide electric currents. We can shift what's going on in the magnetic field, and that's going to shift the way electricity is running through the body. And so simply by going through and finding where in the magnetic field things are jammed up, getting them to loosen and start to move, that gets the electric flow in the body moving as well. And so flow is the state of health that we want to be in. Our electrical system can also get like noise in the signal or static as a consequence of some kind of bad input, maybe a car accident, maybe a difficult parent growing up. Any kind of input that is what I call non-beneficial can create a jam up in the system that just has us making noise. And so the tuning forks find the noise too, because the body is giving off waves, and those waves intersect with the waves of the tuning fork. So we can find places where there's static or noise in the signal, and we just stay there. And what's amazing about our body's electrical system is that it's self-tuning. It's designed to be in harmony with itself, in harmony with nature. And we end up out of tune, just like instruments and cars get out of tune, so do people. But we go back into tune quite beautifully. When the body hears its own noise, it doesn't dig it, and it will use the input to correct itself so that it hears itself as more harmonious. And generally, if there's some kind of disorder that the person is experiencing that's related to that noise, for example, anxiety. Anxiety comes through in the tuning forks like a kind of a pulsing quality, like, and it's just energy that's backed up. It's energy that's not moving. It's all kind of contained and stuck. It's very often creative energy that wants to create, but it's just gotten in the habit of being bound and kind of afraid. And so when the body hears that in itself, it goes, oh, that's not right. And it will start to tune it out and bring itself into a more flowing, comfortable, relaxed state. And that way, anything that was suffering from the jam up just resolves.
Mm-hmm. And so there's this idea of flow, and there's this idea of removing, stagnation and congestion when we're thinking about electric health. And then there's also this idea of voltage, right? And when I think about, voltage, I think of cellular voltage, and, this is a measurement of like energy in the body. And so can you just bring in the concept of voltage and the idea of electric health?
Yeah, so our bodies are like batteries. And we have a sort of optimum place where we want to be. One of the things that I like to ask listeners is, if your body's battery had a meter on a scale from 1 to 100, and 100 is you are totally optimized, you are in a state of flow all the time, you feel great, you have high consistent energy, you have peaceable relationships, you love what you do, right? You're really just optimized. And 1 is obviously the opposite of that. Where does your battery meter fall? Like in this moment, what are you at? 60, 70, 80. If you have a business with 100 employees and you only have 60 of them showing up for work every day, what's going on in your business? Is it thriving? No, you're falling behind on everything. Nothing's getting done. People are stressed. It's not working because the available resources that are required are just simply not present. And so when your battery is under 90%, you're not thriving, right? And the way that our battery gets low, there's a few different ways that our battery gets low. We discharge more than we recharge. We give, we do, we're not sleeping enough, we're not taking naps, we're not engaging in any kind of self-care. Lots of people do that. Lots of moms do that. I know that I've been in places in my life where I was all discharge and practically no recharge, and my meter went really low. Mm-hmm. By giving more than receiving, kind of the same idea, right? But a lot of people, especially people who are drawn to the healing arts, tend to be givers. They tend to be very good at giving and not so good at receiving. And that will put you at a deficit as well. It's important to be able to receive, a compliment. If somebody says, wow, you have such beautiful hair, Christine, and I love your Italian hair. And you'd be like, wow, Eileen, thank you so much, but very often when we're given compliments, we brush them off. We don't take the moment. Somebody's giving you a currency and we want to accept that currency graciously, right? It's important because so many people like to give, so we've got to be able to receive as well. Suppressing our emotions is a really, really big one. So when I'm working in the field and I find these areas of resistance, what I almost always find is that there's a sound there that hasn't been expressed. Words that haven't been spoken, tears that haven't been shed, angry feelings that haven't been communicated. So many of us just bottle everything up inside. And an emotion, when it comes to us, or even any kind of expression, but emotions in particular, they're like waveforms. So the wave gets generated, it rises up, it crests, and then it falls away. So it might crest in crying, or it might crest in like some kind of angry outburst. And if that wave starts to rise up in you and you stuff it back down again, the emotion that you have just suppressed it sequesters electric energy, and then it goes and it hides somewhere because it wasn't allowed to express. And so every single time we bite our words, we hold back an emotion, we stuff something, we're taking that little unit of electric energy and we're taking it out of circulation. So the more stuff that we stuff, the less we have in flow, and our battery just starts to drop. And instead of us being in this strong flow in our central channel, we're all off out here. We're beside ourselves. We're next to ourselves. We're not in our body. And we get weighted down with all of that. So the more that you hold yourself back in all different kinds of ways, you are, and this is something I've really seen in a lot of people that have fibromyalgia, is that there's a tendency to like hold themselves back. You know, it takes a lot of energy to hold yourself back from being authentic. And I think that really getting to a place where you are really in your own authentic flow, where your emotions arise. You know, I'm an emotional windsock, Christine. I cry almost every day, even if it's just a little bit. You know, I'll hear a sad story, something sad will come across my news feed, and I'll take a moment to just feel that sadness and shed a tear. But just like little kids can move from one emotion to another very quickly, you know, in the next breath, I'll be laughing. And so this ability to just let our emotions flow is super important. It's also really important that we speak our truth. And that's not always easy to do. And when I say speak our truth, I don't mean being rude about it, because sometimes people hear that and are like, well, I'm just going to speak my truth. And that's not what I mean, because ideally, optimally, we learn how to speak our truth in the moment as it arises with a sense of diplomacy, kindness, compassion, respect, empathy, right? Speaking your truth doesn't mean being abrasive. It doesn't mean engaging in confrontation. It means just being very gentle and honest with where you're at in any given moment and being authentic, instead of suppressing, saying something that somebody wants to hear, or putting yourself in a compromised position that breeds resentment. You know, all of that puts your biofield in a bunch. Whereas just being in the flow of what arises, you know, it keeps you in flow. It keeps you in flow. And I know being our authentic self is one of the hardest things for people to do. But that is going to optimize your voltage like more than anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such an important lesson, and, you know, really being present, right, and embodied, and really allowing ourselves to really feel what we're feeling. I think that's huge. I think that's a huge aspect. And I heard the term the other day that I think sometimes potentially helps people who might stuff their emotions or be an overgiver, is this idea of, I think Brene Brown said it, but clear is being kind. You know, it's like the more clear we are with our truth and with, you know, the, you know, what's surrounding us, the more that, yeah, we have this flow of energy. I think that's really, really important. And I mean, you see it every day, and you've seen it for, you know, years with your work, that is really at times the root cause of people's disease, is just as simple as that, right?
Yeah, as simple as that. You know, you wouldn't think it, but it's really the case. Because if you're not in your own integrity, then your body isn't in integrity. If your emotional body, your mental body, your physical body aren't in alignment and in integrity, then things start to go out of integrity. They start to fall apart. And there's so much external pressure in the world at the moment, coming from so many different angles, that it's really important that we are in alignment in order to stay upright.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most empowering things that we can do when, you know, the world's really uncertain and polarized and whatever it is right now, but is the more that we connect with ourselves and our truth and in our field of energy and information that we're surrounded by, and, you know, really emanating, that's the way to walk through, you know, this time. I think more than ever, more important than ever right now.
Yeah.
So, Eileen, you talk about, you gave some really great examples of how, our voltage can be disrupted, our electrical system can be disrupted. So, on, the flip side of that, some more ideas on how we can, really cultivate and raise our voltage to be as healthy in our electrical health as possible.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is movement. Movement is very, very important of our bodies, of our breath. I think really breath more than anything, because, we can go for weeks without food, days without liquids, but we can only go a few minutes without breath. And so breath is really where our primary voltage comes from. The oxygen molecule has free electrons, and it's these electrons that attach to the hemoglobin in our blood electromagnetically and then get dropped off at cells. So it's really our breath more than anything that delivers life to our bodies. And lots of people hold their breath, breathe shallowly. If you've grown up in an environment where it wasn't safe or somebody was violent, there's big patterns of locking the trapezius, locking the diaphragm, kind of trying to disappear. And that gets very deeply wound into the body. So, you might find yourself going for a minute at a time and realizing that, wow, I'm not breathing. And then you get to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you need some caffeine or some sugar or a nap because you just haven't been getting enough electric juice into your system as the day is going. So exercise is really important. Anything that gets you to breathe more. Singing is really great because that gets you to breathe, and it literally charges you up when you sing. Singing in groups is even better. Or just going out on a drive with a girlfriend, and getting those 80s ballads cranked up. Just put the windows down and, sing at the top of your lungs. That really helps. Food doesn't definitely make a difference. Eat whole food. If you don't know what to eat, I think the best diet advice that anybody can give you is just eat whole food. Don't eat any kind of food that isn't some kind of whole food that still has light and life in it. If you have to choose between something local that isn't organic but looks really fresh versus something organic that's been trucked in and doesn't seem to have much life force, choose what's local and fresh, because it's going to have more light in it. The light and life force in food sort of fades out over time. And so eating wild food is a really great thing to do. One of my favorite things to do in the summer here in Vermont is to go out barefoot and eat wild berries. Just go stand in bare feet and find wild berries. So much life force in that. Really, it's our connection to nature. And the more strongly we're connected to nature through breath, through fresh, especially wild food, through being in the woods, forest bathing, standing by waterfalls, going to the ocean or the beach, right? We all know how rejuvenating that is. Taking naps. A lot of people won't let themselves take naps. We have a real sort of guilt-driven, overdoing work ethic that keeps us going even when we need to stop. So learning to listen to your body, to really understand the subtle signals of your body. I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, I need this, I need to sleep, I need to say no to this particular engagement because it's just going to put me over the edge. The more we listen to our own bodies, the healthier we're going to become. Yeah.
Yeah. And, what you shared is like, everyone has access to these things. Maybe they might not have, access to fresh berries in their, in their neighborhood, but, nature, right? There's some form of nature that I'm hoping everyone has some form of access to. And so I think in modern times, because we understand the body in so many different ways, and, we have this lens of science that we're always, connecting with, we can overcomplicate things, right? And we can really, forget all of these wonderful things, our breath, grounding, being in nature, being in connection, really drive our electrical health. So I feel like that's such an empowering message. And one of the things that I love learning about, and I know you write in your book and you have a lot of knowledge of, is we have our electrical system in our body, our biofield, but we have this idea of the fourth phase of water in our body. And we have, obviously we are primarily made up of water, and we have all these fluids in our system. And so can you just tie your understanding of this fourth phase of water and how that is also tied to our electrical health and how we can improve it?
Yeah. So Gerald Pollack wrote a wonderful book called The Fourth Phase of Water. He basically observed that water polarizes itself in our cells. We end up with more negative charge at boundaries and more positive charge in the bulk of the water. And that it's absolutely essential for water to take this structured shape in our bodies in order for everything to work properly, for the electric flow of things. When, there's a lot we can say about water beyond easy water, but it's certainly that requires sufficient charge, because if you don't have enough voltage in your body, your water isn't going to structure properly, and then things aren't going to do so well. But we also know from a variety of researchers that water is extremely impressionable. And water kind of believes everything that you tell it. And we've seen this even with seedlings. If you plant seedlings or you have plants and you give them love, then, or the water droplets that Emoto did, the crystals form. But if you give them a hard time and you say mean things, then the plant or the water or the bowl of rice or whatever it is that you're doing your experiment on suffers. And so it's super important, I think more than anything, Christine, that we love ourselves and that we love the water in us, that we love every single one of the molecules of creation that we are currently stewarding in our bodies. And unfortunately, a great many people, most people in my observation, have a terrible habit of being self-critical, self-attacking, self-judgmental. Nothing's going to weaken the charge in your inner water more than being told that it sucks, that it's not good enough, that it's fat, that it's dumb, that it shouldn't have said this. All of those things impact our human animals in a very profound way. And I can tell when I'm working on somebody, if I'm like over their thighs and I'm listening in, and I'll say, do you hate your thighs? And they'll say, yes, how did you know? And I'll say, because I can feel how your thighs feel having that negative energy directed at them. Wow. We don't ever punish or shame or embarrass ourselves into hell. We love ourselves into health. Love is what heals us. The nature of nature is love. It's harmony. And this is why nature heals us. Nature doesn't have this weird separation and self-judgment towards itself that we as humans do. We all have a story that we're guilty sinners, that we're not worthy, and that we deserve some kind of constant and chronic punishment for our not good enoughness. And that is absolutely impacting your water. In fact, there's two different types of water, right? There's heavy water and light water. And it has to do with the way the electrons are positioned, but heavy water has all the electrons down and light water has all the electrons up. And so you can even feel it in yourself when you're like, versus, electrons up. And this comes from following your ahs, following your updrafts, saying yes to the things that bring you joy, saying no to the things that bring you down if you don't have to do them, so that you're continually keeping yourself in this sort of oriented up, more lighthearted, light-watered position. And you won't stay there if some voice in your head is trying to put you down all the time. So internal self-dialogue of love, care, and compassion and kindness is super, super, super important, maybe more than anything. Yeah, and as you're talking, and I study so many things, and it comes back to love, right? Again, I know that sounds maybe too simple to people, but it truly is. And when you tie that emotion of love, and when we think about love, we think about the heart, right? And, with your understanding of the heart as well, it's, the strongest
electrical and magnetic field that is generated. So how beautiful that our bodies actually, when we're, in a state of love and in a state of positive emotion, we're really in this really coherent, high vibrational state of health. I think it's just beautiful how the body, the physiology mirrors that spiritual law, and physical law. So I think it's a huge reminder. Anything to comment about the heart? I have a few other questions coming to my mind, but any reflections on the heart?
Well, the heart is really important, and the work of heart math. If any, I know a lot of people have come across heart math by this point, but they really did determine that when we feel the coherent emotions like gratitude, love. I really like the word appreciation. It's sort of my new favorite word, because when you think about gratitude, it tends to be this sort of thing, like, oh, I'm so grateful. But when we appreciate something, it's an extension out. Like, I really appreciate you, Christine. So there's a kind of movement of energy. There's a kind of giving that comes with appreciation. And when we move forward in a spirit of appreciation, appreciating the people around us, like, think about somebody that is in your life who's kind of difficult, and that every time you have an encounter with them is, but if you go into that next encounter in a spirit of appreciation of that person, when your gaze and your heart is open to whatever you can appreciate about them, you're far more likely to draw out that behavior. So appreciation can be a good antidote, with things that you're kind of, try appreciating it. Try seeing what it is about that you appreciate. Really, anything, when we move forward in the spirit of appreciation, we tend to bring out the best of what can happen.
I like that. I like that reframe. I'm going to work with that in my life. You can feel the difference in the energy between those two words, and they have both a hugely profound effect on our physical body. So no, I love that. Eileen, I can think about, some of my patients, or, some of the listeners out there, like, they're getting us, right? They understand what you're saying. They're understanding that they need to be more appreciative, more loving, less self-critical. But they might not, they might have that knowing, but not be able to, they're not there yet. So I guess maybe some practical tools, or some people who are really stuck in wanting to make those changes, but really aren't there yet. How can we help them make some movements in that direction?
The first step is awareness, of just starting to become aware of what your habits and tendencies and unconscious verbal patterns are. To just step back and widen the lens and look at it more objectively. And I think it's really useful to think about our bodies as sort of like animals. When we were talking earlier about how you are really your light, you are really the light that animates you. And so when you die, you leave your body behind. So in a way, your body is kind of like a horse. It's like the horse you get to ride through life on, because if all you are is a cloud of light, you don't get to have sex, you don't get to eat chocolate, you don't get to watch, you just miss out on all of the potential pleasures of having a body. And so we want to maybe objectify our body a little bit more and think about, like, if my body was a horse, then I would treat it with love, with kindness. I would brush it. I would tell it it's beautiful. I would make sure it gets oats and apples. I would make sure it gets out for walks. I would take really good care of this horse. I wouldn't tell it it's fat. I wouldn't tell it its flanks are starting to get a little flabby. You just wouldn't do that to your horse. You'd be like, this is my horse. I want to keep this horse for as long as I can. I want to keep it as healthy and happy as I can, because that horse deserves that. And so it's the same with our human bodies. It's like we have this human animal that our consciousness gets to inhabit for this little lifetime. And so realizing that, like I said earlier, it's a conglomerate of water, of minerals, of starlight. So why not treat it with the same sort of adoration and kindness you would treat a puppy or a baby dolphin or your horse? And I think that if you can step back and kind of disconnect from that, I'm no good, I'm a guilty sinner, that sort of ego mind virus programming that we've had put into us, and realize how foolish it is to treat ourselves with unkindness. Obviously, we want to have something that puts pressure on us to be the best that we can. So I recommend removing the inner critic to the best of your ability and replacing it with an inner coach. Because an inner coach is kind, supportive, nourishing, wants you to be the best you can be, is going to give you good tips so that if you do something stupid, the critic isn't there beating you up for it. The coach is saying, what did you learn and how can we apply this for next time?
Mhm.
It's just a much cleaner kind of relationship that's just better for you all around. I've worked with a number of people who've given themselves Crohn's disease and other inner disorders because their inner critic was so vicious. They're like eating themselves from the inside. To what end? To what end? It's not making you better.
Mhm. Mhm. No, I love these points, and I love, thinking of our bodies. They're just these vessels. They're these instruments, and they're a barometer, right? When we're having symptoms within them, we have to kind of look at from this larger, angle. And the inner coach, I'm going to use that with some of my patients as well. I love that flip of guidance, right? Of guidance, and how we would talk to a friend or a child, or we would never say the things often that we say to ourselves that we would say to another. So it's a really important reminder, especially now. As we wrap up, Eileen, I think people always love to hear just either stories of hope or inspiration or anecdotes or anything personal on your heart that really brings some of these concepts to life. Anything come right to mind?
Yeah, what comes to mind is kind of an interesting one. So at the beginning of the year, I did a series with the Shift Network, and one of the things that I observed working with this group was that I was reading the timeline of the group. It's like 1,200 people. I turned it into a hologram that's like has everybody's data set in it. And then I read it with the forks. And one of the things that I was observing, that when I was reading the timeline of the group back in around the time a lot of people were born, the 50s, the 60s, I was really struck by how sort of dark and dim the collective felt. It just felt like there wasn't a lot of light. And then I sort of looked around the room in this moment. I was like, there's so much more ambient light now than there was decades ago. And even though we've been living with sort of an artificially created doom and gloom scenario for a while now, what I saw really clearly was that there's never been a better opportunity for us to become enlightened, because there's so much more ambient light on the planet. And, I know that we've talked about in the past the photon belt, or where the Earth is in going around the great central sun. I don't know exactly, honestly, what has created more light in the environment now. So we really have the opportunity, because there's so much information. You're talking about how Joe Dispenza was talking about our electric bodies and our electric universe, and I am, and many people are, to wake up to the fact that we are light. We are light, and that it isn't just a spiritual light, that our body's electrical system is a biological light and our spiritual light. So we don't need to separate science and spirituality anymore. That when you have the experience of seeing the light, that it's an awareness of, wow, this is my electrical biological system that's part of my human body. And this light that I see in me is the same as the one light, and it's all one light. And to me, that's enlightenment, is kind of recognizing that you are a light body, that you are a drop of sunshine, that you are a drop of source, and that the whole universe is in you, in this light that you are. And it's not really that big of a deal. And when that light becomes, when you get the noise and the resistance out of it and it goes into a state of flow, you feel that sense of unity consciousness. You feel that sense of connection. You're not all jammed up in your pain body and all the noise and stuckness and story. Once that resolves and settles, and it can, then that feeling of connection, of unity, is very, very accessible. And there's a real peace and contentment in resting in that, simply resting in it. And it's far more achievable now than it was 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Like all of the codes and the information for you to experience your sense self as an enlightened being are right here, right now, and available. And I think that the more people wake up to their own inner power and the connection that happens between us, because if I don't stop at my skin, if my biofield goes out, if I'm essentially an infinite being, then we can start to experience this sense of unity consciousness, because it's the illusion of division that is at the root of most of the things that we suffer from individually and collectively. And so there's an opportunity here to achieve enlightenment within ourselves and within the human family, to start moving in that direction. And I don't think it's as far away as people might think that it is.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a beautiful message, especially now, and I think doing this work, having this awareness, you cannot help yourself from feeling that connection and that joy that we're all, meant to feel. And I think that's when, the walls of separation fall, right? And that we can, see each other wanting the same thing, right? And, work through this together. And I had shared, I went to this conference with Joe Dispenza's, and we worked a lot on our electrical health, and we, did masterful work. And I woke up after 3 or 4 days, and I was in Florida, I had to fly back to Seattle, and I just woke up so joyful, and every interaction I had on the airport, and it was just it was amazing, and so I just had a taste of that moment, and I think that's really how we're really called to show up now. And the more that we do the work ourselves, we'll have that experience with each other. So I think it's a beautiful message, and I'm appreciative of all of your work bringing this through at this really potent time, and to be on the planet.
Yeah, it's definitely a potent time to be on the planet. Thanks everybody for being here with us.
Yeah. Thanks, Eileen. And if you want to just share where people can find out more about your work, we'll give you the opportunity to do that.
Great. Okay. Well, we have 2 websites, biofieldtuning.com, where you can actually learn. We have our full certification program online now. So you can become a certified biofield tuning practitioner from the comfort of your own home. It's a very rewarding practice. I've loved using tuning forks on clients. I've been doing it for 25 years now. Never get tired of it. Because every time you tune somebody, you get tuned too. So it's but it's not like massage, where every time you massage, you're definitely not getting a massage. So you can learn about that. I also developed my own line of sound therapy tools and accessories, very high quality tuning forks. So those are there. And then if you want to learn more about electric health, electrichealth.com, where I've compiled a whole bunch of peer-reviewed journals about the biofield. If anybody's doing research on the biofield, academic or scholarly research, there's 40 or so. I've already done the research for you. That's all right there. And also a whole bunch of mainstream publications about the electric nature of life, the universe, and everything. So there's about 40 different articles there about the electric nature of the soil, about fungus, about just all kinds, everything's electric, your gut bacteria, and just a whole bunch more sort of general information about the biofield and electric health. So good rabbit holes to take deep dives into there.
Oh. Well, thank you so much for putting all that all together and for this enlightening conversation. And it's always a joy to talk to you.
Thanks, Christine. You as well.